an entitled father tried to get me kicked out of the store for having big breasts. So, the only reason why the entitled parent in this story didn't go to prison was because I was 18 at the time, but the fact that this happened the way it did still pisses me off. So, when I turned 18, I started working at a call center and often walked around the city a lot in order to avoid my toxic mother. Yes, I know what you're thinking, but I was safe and always had a form of self-defense. I was young but not stupid. Anyways, that year, I experienced another growth spurt and went from a C cup to a DD cup, and I was getting a lot of weird looks when in public. As much as I hate to say it, I was pretty young and naive, so I never thought it was because of the way my body changed, but I preferred to keep my distance from people. One day, I decided that I was going to go to Walmart so that I could pick out some yarn for a crochet project I wanted to work on while at work. We were allowed to crochet as long as we didn't avoid the calls that were automatically answered on our systems. While I was checking out the yarn, I noticed a kid, who looked like he was 13/14, standing at the end of the aisle watching me. Thanks to my history of getting bullied and beaten up, I immediately grew cautious and started debating if I wanted to get my yarn here or go to the Hobby Lobby across the parking lot. Before I could make a decision, an adult man came up and started leading the son off, so I started to relax and think that I was overreacting, that is until the ED came back. ED, excuse me, but where did you get you implants? They look so real. Me, excuse me. I was really embarrassed and shocked, and I was already getting creeper vibes from this guy. ED, your implants. He waves his hands in front of my breasts and gets uncomfortably close to me. Where did you get them? Me, I was at a loss for words and didn't know if he was serious or just being a creep overall. At this moment, the kid came up and poked at my right breast, and I instinctively smacked his hand away, not caring that he was a kid. Me, excuse me, but you really shouldn't do that, especially to a woman. It's not polite, and it's considered SA and SH. ED immediately got mad at me and started screaming at me to not touch his son. He said that it was my fault and that, if I didn't want attention like this, then I should keep my fun bags put away. I was in tears and looking around for an escape, especially since, the more the ED yelled at me, the closer he got to me. He started telling me that there was no way my breasts were real and that he needed to feel them to know for sure. He even told me that I needed to let the ES touch them so he could learn the difference between implants and real breasts. Remembering the fact that I had my pepper spray in my bag for any occasion where I needed to defend myself, I usually had a knife, too, but that seemed a bit extreme in the heat of the moment. I pulled the can of pepper spray and told them both to step back and get away from me. At this point, an employee turned the corner, having heard us yelling, and saw me holding the pepper spray. He freaked out and called for a manager before coming up and yelling at me, demanding to know what I was doing. Thanks to me being in tears, the ED was able to butt in and started lying to the employee that I was seducing his son and pulled my pepper spray out when the ED had tried to come to his son's rescue. The ES immediately started agreeing with the ED, and the employee was already saying that he was going to call the police while the ED demanded that me and my big breasts get kicked out of the store. Thankfully, at that second, one of my coworkers, a big, burly guy who often gave me a ride at night after hearing that I took the taxi home at night because my mother refused to teach me to drive, rounded the corner, leading a manager right to the mess. The manager demanded that everyone shut up and calm down, and, when we had, he turned to me and asked my side of the story. I told them how the ED insisted that I needed to let them feel my breasts to see if they were real and how I had already explained I wasn't comfortable and didn't want their attention. The ED backtracked on his story and tried to defend himself and EK, saying it was all for educational purposes and lied that I had agreed beforehand. This is when my coworker got mad and pointed at the camera at the end of the aisle, reminding them that it would have caught everything. The ED and EK both went silent for a moment before making a break for the exit. The manager took off after them, yelling at them to stop, and my coworker berated the employee for threatening me the way he did. Of course, the ED and EK got away, but the employee was fired, and I never went back to that store by myself per my friend's request. Please, teach your sons to respect women, and don't harass women. Plenty of us are insecure of our bodies and don't want the attention our bodies attract, and we appreciate it if you don't make things worse for us. Also, never assume that a woman's body is fake or that you are entitled to touch it. So I have a kind of relatable story. I used to teach kindergarten at a private daycare. There were a few of my coworkers with bigger breasts. I would consider myself just above average, but nothing huge. There was this one kid who had a thing about touching the teachers he was talking to, like patting their stomach, rubbing their arms, or groping breasts. Nothing sexual in nature, like he would talk about some imaginative idea while touching teachers like a fidget toy thing. Well, one coworker of mine loved him to pieces and would let him grope her all the time. She would say he's not doing it sexually, he's just a kid, he doesn't understand, and it's not a big deal. Well, one day he does it to me, and I take a step back and hold his hands together in between us, and I explain that if he wants to hold my hand or rub my arm while he talks to me, that's fine, but do not touch my chest. He's like, okay, and proceeds to tell me whatever story he wanted to say. Well, coworker saw me tell him no thanks and then got on my case about how I shouldn't be sexualizing his actions and that he's just a kid. I explained to her that while yes, he's a kid, not everyone will find it appropriate when he gropes his future teachers, and what kind of habit are we promoting here? Like, there are other ways he can talk to people while touching them. I mentioned it to him mom, and even she agreed that he does it to her all the time and it doesn't seem to matter how many times she says not to. He laughs it off and says he's just joking. Apparently all the other coworkers knew about this habit and just ignored it for the sake of him being a kid. I was the only one who had a problem with it, apparently, but my intention wasn't to demonize or sexualize his actions, just redirect to something far more appropriate. This is just the start of toxic behavior being taught to children, and it needs to stop. It teaches young boys that it's okay to touch women as long as it's not sexual and tells women to just deal with it. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification. See you on another video. Bye.